Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana Harinq if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today, I am joined by our reporter, Mike Cason, and Mike is here today to talk about something that I think affects a lot of people in the state of Alabama, and that is Alabama's PACT program. Now, that's Prepaid Affordable College Tuition Program, and if you've been in the state for several years, for more than a decade, you might know the problems that Alabama has faced with its PACT program. But this fall, the program is actually on track to pay full college tuition for the people enrolled in the program for the first time in more than a decade. That's pretty big news here if you are, again, if you have one of those PACs and if you have been paying attention to this over the past several years in Alabama. Mike, there's a lot that goes on with these PACs. There's been a long history of PACT woes in Alabama. But first, why don't you start out by explaining what exactly Alabama's PACT program is, and then what it's doing this fall and why that's important.
The legislature created thanks for having me, Ivana. The legislature created the PACT program in 1989, and it was a way for parents and grandparents or anybody that wanted, to pay college tuition years in advance for a child or an infant. And the idea was you could either pay a lump sum or you could make monthly installments. The idea was you would save money in the long term. And when your child got older or grandchild got old enough for college, their tuition would be fully paid because you bought this contract.
Sounds like something that a lot of parents, grandparents probably did instead of buying bonds. Like we had heard for a while, buying government bonds for a baby. Maybe people bought a PACT instead.
Right, exactly. And they sold 77,000 of these contracts. And it worked well for a while, but then in the decade of the 2000s, there were the investments. They had money invested in stocks. They had some periods where they didn't do well, and college tuitions began to rise, really skyrocketed there for a period of years. There was a period of years during the 2000s where tuitions increased an average of 10% or more, and the investments were not making nearly enough to keep up with that. So by 2010, the actuaries could look into the future and say, we're going to run out of money. We're not going to be able to pay off. At the time, they had about 45,000 contracts, I think. So they determined we're going to run out of money. We're going to have to do something. And the legislature passed a bailout for them, $548 million. It was going to be paid over 15 years. It turned out that was not going to be nearly enough. It was going to take several hundred more $1 million. And parents and grandparents filed a lawsuit because they were not going to be able to get what they had paid for. And there was a settlement reached in 2011. And the settlement said everybody will get a benefit, but it'll be the 2010 tuition levels. So if you'll be paid, your benefit will be equal to the 2010 tuition levels. And as tuition rose above that, you're going to have to make up the difference.
So I think that's important to kind of reiterate. You said that when people bought these PACTs, they were believing when they purchased them that the beneficiary of that PACT would go to one of these approved in-state universities and schools for free, essentially. That was covering the tuition. You were paying that tuition in advance in installments, and you were locked into a certain rate. It seems like the flaw in a lot of this is that nobody checked with the schools to make sure that those rates wouldn't increase or to put a cap on that increase. So then you get to the mid-2000s when all of these rates start skyrocketing, and then the money in the pot is getting less, and it sounds like you've got a real problem. Now, in this 2000, I believe you said 11 settlement, the judge wrote in the order that, look, this is not the full benefit, obviously, and this is not going to satisfy everybody. But the judge said that they would rather get a little bit of a benefit than nothing at all. So the judge said, look, we will lock you into, I believe you said the 2010 tuition level, but then you've got to pay the difference. But Mike, that could be a big difference if you are locked into, say, a 2010 tuition rate, then you go to college in 2020. In that decade, the rates for these tuitions have likely skyrocketed, and your PACT probably is not holding the kind of weight that you would expect it to.
That's right. It was a considerable gap there for some people. And but the settlement also said that the PACT board of directors, which every year review, they hire actuaries that review how much is in the fund and how much their liabilities are. And starting in 2015, the settlement allowed for them to increase the benefit above that 2010 level. The 2010 level was a baseline. So starting in 2015, they started increasing the benefit. And I think the first year was just a 3%, but they increased it 7 straight years from like 3% up to 10% each time. And so that made that gap a little bit less. And then this year, the legislature, when they passed the budgets earlier this year, they had a lot more money on hand than most years. And they were able to give the PACT program $177 million, which was the remaining balance of that bailout they passed back in 2010. And that, according to Young Boozer, who's the state treasurer, who's sort of overseen this whole process of salvaging this program, that enabled the PACT board of directors to approve a 24% increase in the benefit this year. So which is what the story we had last week was about, is that with that 24% increase, everybody, the remaining contract holders, if they go to a state university, their tuition will be fully paid as the original intent of the PACT program was. And this will be the first year, this fall will be the first year that that's been the case.
So
and
again,
there's still some caveat out there. If Mr. Boozer said, if a university does an extraordinary increase in tuition, that could affect this. But as of now, they anticipate that everybody's tuition will be fully paid.
And that is kind of the nutshell version of, again, this long talk, these decades of problems with Alabama's PACT program. If you are just tuning in and you're looking for the nutshell, that's it. That people who have a PACT, so beneficiaries of a PACT, if they go to one of these in-state schools and state universities, and I'll let you kind of clarify that in a minute, Mike, if they go to one of these schools, their tuition should be paid in full this year. Now, again, I want to get to some of those schools here in a minute, but there's another fine print here, Mike. What about all of those people from, say, 2010 or even before 2010 to now, 2022, who didn't get the full benefit of their PACT, who maybe still owed thousands of dollars in state tuition, even though they had a PACT? Does this $177 million infusion into the PACT fund, does State Treasurer Young Boozer say that what's going to happen to them?
Well, there's no provision for them to recover the gap that they had to make up. The settlement which was reached in 2011 said that at the end, the PACT program will end in 2032, because that's when the final contract can be paid out. And they stopped selling contracts in 2008. So the settlement says that any money left over in the fund after 2032 goes to the education trust fund. It does not go to the contract holders, including those who wound up with out-of-pocket costs because they didn't get the full benefit they were expecting. And that's a point of contention. And there's a Facebook page called Save Alabama PACT that was started years ago by the people who bought contracts and advocated for their rights. And you'll find commenters on there who think they should be entitled to some of that leftover money because they had out of pocket costs.
Well, and again, why is that leftover money, depending on how much it is at the end of the PACT program? I believe you said that was 2032. At the end of this program, 2032, why does that money have to go into the education fund?
Well, because that's what the settlement says, the 2011 lawsuit settlement. So State Auditor Jim Ziegler posted on that Save Alabama PACT Facebook page that he's going to propose legislation that would, instead of that money going back to the education trust fund, that it would go to those contract holders who had out-of-pocket costs. And, there's a lot of support on that Facebook page for that idea, understandably. But I don't know how legislation would do that, but it's part of that settlement. So I guess the court would have to agree to change the settlement, terms of the settlement,
Well,
to allow
and
some of
right
that money to be
now,
distributed.
right, you reported there are 9,000 active PACs left, basically in this program from that have not been cashed in from when the state stopped selling them. And I believe you also reported there's $250 million in that fund right now, so in the pot.
Right.
So essentially, what State Treasurer Young Boozer is saying that $250 million in the pot right now should be enough at today's rates of in-state tuition for those 9,000 kids and I guess teenagers now to be able to go to school and have their tuition paid in full. Is that right?
That's right. And they have reports from their actuaries, and one of them shows different scenarios, and one of them says that if colleges increase their tuition an average of 4% a year between now and 2032, they'll have I forgot the exact figure. I think it was like 40 million left in the pot, or maybe it's 33 million. But they've got a cushion there, so they've got a cushion there to account for tuition increases.
Well, and I have an interesting question here, and I'm not sure how much we know about this, Mike, at the moment, because again, a lot of this is still being formed. But question here saying that is this new change again in allowing and paying out those full benefits for the first time in over a decade? What about if you have unused hours from another child's PACT program in the family? Can those hours be transferred and receive full benefits in today's tuition rates?
I didn't understand your question. I'm sorry.
Can you essentially take, if you have, I'm sure that there are people who didn't cash in on those PACs or maybe said, look, I can't afford the difference, so I'm not going to go to college. If you have another person in your family that has a situation like that and has a PACT, could a person essentially take those hours and transfer those hours from that PACT, transfer PACs over, or are they non-transferable and essentially you lose your money there?
You mean transfer the benefit to a student who did not have a PACT contract bought for them?
Correct.
That's a great question. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
I know that's a little weedy, but I think it does illustrate the questions that people have about PACs and also how much this impacts people. This is again one of those kitchen table issues that we talk about where people are trying to send their kids to college or decide what they're going to do in high school if they are going to be able to continue to go to college if that's what they want to do. Now, I know we have kept saying the caveat here of in-state schools. So tell me a little bit about the schools that the PACs are covering this fall.
Well, the way it works is if you go to a state college, the money goes to the college. It doesn't go to the contract holder or the student. It pays the tuition to the college for whatever the amount of the tuition is. If you go to an out-of-state college, they calculate an average for Alabama colleges, average tuition, and so your benefit in that case would be the average tuition for Alabama colleges if you go to an out-of-state college. So if you go to an out-of-state college where you're paying a higher tuition, you would have to pay the difference. Same if you go to a private college in Alabama, it pays the average of the state public college tuition. And as of this previous academic year, all but seven, the PACT was paying the full tuition benefit at all but 7 of Alabama's public universities, and it was paying the full tuition benefit at all the community colleges. And this latest increase will cover those last 7 universities where it wasn't paying the full benefit.
So essentially, again, if you've got a PACT, you can go to, I'm just going to name some schools, see if this is included: Auburn, University of Alabama, UAB, and your tuition would be covered.
Right.
This is, I know, very good news for people who are applying or rather starting. I forget how late we are in the year, starting probably that process of heading to college if they have a PACT. Big news there for them. Mike, I know this is a big deal. Again, kind of a complicated one. So thank you for digging into this and reporting this. We're going to leave a link here to your reporting so that people can read that and reach out if they have any questions, and we'll try to get them answered.
Okay. Great.
Mike,
Thanks
thank you so
for having
much
me.
for all of your expertise here. Everybody watching, thank you so much. Have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you tomorrow.